Next topic is protein metabolism. When we eat proteins, they are digested. Digested proteins are broken down into amino acids, which are not stored in the body but either oxidized to produce ATP or used for the synthesis of new proteins. So there's two main fates for the proteins that we eat. First, they're broken down into amino acids, and then they are used by the body for making of the energy or synthesis of the new proteins. So basically, the proteins are the molecules that are made out of individual amino acids. There are different types of them, and these are individual amino acids. When we eat proteins, they are digested by digestive enzymes into individual amino acids, and these amino acids can have one of the two fates. The first fate of the amino acids is to be oxidized to make ATP energy, just like glucose or lipids can be oxidized. Basically, they can be burned into energy by our body. And second, they can be used to make our own body's proteins. We have lots of proteins in the body. Examples could be collagen, the protein of our skin and bones, keratin, the protein of our skin. There's myosin, the protein of our muscle. There's also enzymes. Enzymes are also proteins. You've met a lot of digestive enzymes such as amylase and protease. There are various proteins made out of amino acids, and to make them, we gotta have synthesis reactions to make these proteins. So the proteins in the body, they function as enzymes. Like for example, amylase enzyme in our saliva that digests starches into glucose. Some are involved in transportation. They can be transport proteins. We saw the proteins being used for the transport of lipids earlier. They can serve as antibodies. Antibodies, the proteins of the immune system that fight various infections in the body. They can be clotting factors for blood, important for blood coagulation, like stopping of the bleeding. They can be hormones, for example, insulin and epinephrine, and can be parts of structures in a body such as muscle fibers, that means muscle cells, skin, and bones. Proteins are extremely important in our body. Our bodies are primarily made out of protein. So most of our body is water, of course, but when you say what's the next most abundant molecule in our body, that's going to be various types of proteins, and they create the mass of our body. Okay, there's also going to be lots of calcium, but proteins are the most important structural molecules in our body. Protein metabolism, of course, catabolism and anabolism, two parts of it, just like glucose and lipids. Protein catabolism is the breakdown of proteins into amino acids. These amino acids are converted to other amino acids. They can be converted to fatty acids, and they can be converted to ketone bodies or glucose. Okay. The cells can oxidize amino acids to generate ATP via Krebs cycle. So the part of the glycolysis, the part of the cellular respiration called the Krebs cycle, you have to go back to see the fates of glucose for these steps. Part of the Krebs cycle is able to oxidize amino acids into generation of the ATP. So we can add to this diagram here that amino acids can also be converted into other amino acids, into fatty acids, Fa, into ketone bodies, or into glucose. Okay, and this is going to be protein catabolism. One, two, and three. I'm sorry, 1 and 2 only. 1 and 3 only. Whoops. I'm trying to be in a rush. Okay, that's protein catabolism 1 and 3. Protein anabolism is the synthesis of protein that creates new proteins by bonding together of the amino acids on ribosomes. So the number 2 is protein anabolism. Number 2 only. And that's converting amino acids, connecting them together into proteins. And that's done by the organelles known as ribosomes. Okay, so go back to where we were. Okay. Here is a summary of protein metabolism. We're not going to go through this. This is Krebs cycle used for the making of the energy from proteins. Okay. So the regulation of metabolism, this is the next topic. It depends on chemicals in the cells and signals from the nervous and endocrine system. Some aspects of metabolism depend on the time elapsed since the last meal. Okay, so our metabolism does depend on what we do and what we eat and how much we eat and when we eat. So for example, if we're active, our metabolism is going to be higher, so faster, and if we eat more often, our metabolism is going to be also faster because metabolism does involve digestion. So if there's digestion, there's metabolism going higher. Okay, so here's a little summary of the metabolic adaptations. We can go through it. So look for number 1 first, of course. And we'll zoom out a little bit. Okay, so this is number 1. Glucose from the blood. So this is blood vessels. This is gastrointestinal tract, the intestines. So gastrointestinal tract contains the nutrients that's been digested, so now they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. The 3 groups of nutrients absorbed from the digestive system into the bloodstream are going to be glucose, amino acids from the proteins, glucose from carbs and sugars, and triglycerides from fats that we eat. These triglycerides will be in chylomicrons. Okay, so if we start with amino acids first, these amino acids are going to go through the bloodstream and they're going to go to 2 main places in the body. They're going to go to the liver and to the muscle. Okay, these amino acids in the liver, they will be converted into the keto acids first. Then these keto acids will be converted into either glucose or fatty acids. Fatty acids will be converted into triglycerides. So basically the amino acids that reach the liver, they will be converted either into glucose, into triglycerides, or made into the proteins. So liver is the main organ in the body that performs metabolism. Okay, so amino acids from the bloodstream, they reach the liver, they can be converted into proteins, into glucose, or into fats. Okay, the amino acids that reach the muscle, they will become muscle proteins. So muscle cells can use these amino acids to synthesize muscle proteins directly. That's a skeletal muscle. Now, triglycerides, when the triglycerides are absorbed into the blood, they actually are delivered straight into the fat tissue. Okay, so all of the fats that we eat in the bloodstream, they are going to go straight into the fat. Okay, so fatty meals will result in having more fat in the body. But that doesn't end there. The triglycerides that are in fat, they are absorbed by these fat cells. Okay, they can later be released from the fat cells and become energy later. Okay, the triglycerides from the liver that were made from the glucose or the amino acids will also travel to the fat. Okay, they will become fat tissue. Okay, and the last thing we have is glucose. Glucose in the bloodstream can have 1, 2, 3 places that it can go. So of course it's going to go to the liver. So notice that triglycerides do not go into the liver. They go straight to the fat tissue. But amino acids and glucose, they do travel into the liver first. So glucose will go to the liver and it will be converted into the triglycerides or glycogen. Okay, the glycogen will be stored in liver for later use, and then triglycerides will be converted. Triglycerides will be carried into the fat cells of the fat tissue and become fat. Okay, so excess glucose that we eat will become fat. Excess proteins that we eat will become fat. Fat that we eat will become fat, and that fat will be storing the triglycerides for later use. Okay, and these triglycerides can be later used to make energy through the process of the oxidation. Okay, another place glucose can go to is the muscle. This is where it's going to be converted into glycogen for storage, because glucose is an important source of energy for muscle cells. And glucose will actually be absorbed by most body tissues directly. It doesn't have to go through the liver or through the fat tissue to be absorbed by other body tissues. Glucose can be absorbed by all body cells and converted into the energy. Okay, so what this diagram is not showing is that triglycerides that are stored in the fat tissue and glycogen in the liver, and even the glycogen and the proteins in the muscle, they can all be converted into the glucose and absorbed by body tissues to make energy. But it's a little bit longer process. Glucose from the bloodstream to the tissues is much faster. So the fastest way to absorb glucose into the tissues is eat it, and that dietary glucose that's directly in the bloodstream will go to the body tissues to make energy.